I am thrilled and excited to have the opportunity to introduce this wonderful, wonderful event. My name is Joe Seabrooks, and that's Seabrooks as in 2 bodies of water, 1 salty, 1 fresh. And I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president here at MCC-Penn Valley. For those of you who are very familiar with this wonderful campus, I'd like to welcome you back home. Those of you who this is your first experience, I'd like to welcome you. You are in store for a magnificent evening of provocative thinking and expanding perspectives of what happened during the Civil War. You're also privy to this event because of the magnificent leadership of Dr. Karen Curls, who serves as our division chair for social sciences. It's also in conjunction with the Ajamu Webster Institute, and so without those great entities, this event could not occur. I'd like to take a few moments to just recognize some of our amazing faculty. Could you all raise your hand? Y'all can give them a round of applause. We have our dynamic duo, Dean of Instruction and Dean of Students, Dr. Cheryl Carpenter Davis and Ms. Yvette Sweeney, Dean of Students. I'd like to recognize them. We have tons of magnificent students that are here. Because you're not going to get credit for class if you don't. They don't play with that. And I'd like to also acknowledge our magnificent community for which the shoulders we stand. I know that the seat that I sit in is able to occur because of the struggles that many fights that folks have fought before me. And so I don't take that for granted, and I'm grateful for you being here. Now, the person I want to bring to the podium to introduce our magnificent guest speaker is a legend in this community as it relates to education, the investment in young people, and the investment in economic upliftment of Kansas Cityans. And so, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce the great Ajamu Webster to make the introduction.
Good evening. Harry Jones is Assistant Director and Curator of the Washington, D.C. based African American Civil War Freedom Fountain and Museum. He is one of the foremost authorities on the role of African Americans in the Civil War. Harry's refreshingly new perspective on this subject reveals just how extensive and well organized. Oh. Can y'all hear me now? Yeah. Thank you. That's easier on my voice too, by the way. Before Harry fully immersed himself in this subject matter, he served in the United States Marine Corps for over 20 years. He retired as a captain in 1997. Since then, he has conducted extensive research on African American military service throughout American history. Harry is convinced that one of the best ways to dispel the myths that marginalizes the military contributions of African Americans is through museum exhibits. As a curator, content developer, and scriptwriter for the African American Civil War Museum exhibit entitled The Glorious March to Liberty, he dispels such myths by employing the voices of the history makers to tell the story. Quote, in our exhibit, unquote, he explains, quote, we quote no scholars. If you are not there in the makings of the history, you do not get a quote in our exhibit.
All right now.
Other than his work at the African American Civil War Museum, Harry has worked on exhibits that are currently on display across the country. He was a content developer for the National Park Service's museum at the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site at Tuskegee, Alabama, a content advisor for the American Civil War Center exhibit, quote, Take Our Stand, and a content advisor for the National Archives and Records Administration exhibit, Discovering the Civil War. Television outlets, including the History Channel and the Public Broadcast System, has also sought his expertise. He has appeared on the History Channel, Gettysburg documentary, PBS American Lives 2, with Henry Louis Gates, and the History Detective. Harry was also called on by NBC's Who Do You Think You Are to assist Vanessa Williams in her understanding the contribution of her Civil War ancestor, David Carrell, who served in the 26th United States Colored Troops. So what did we do? Did we sit by passively after being enslaved in this country for 246 years? Did we wait on the bells to ring? Did we wait on emancipation to come to us? Were we cowering in rooms behind closed doors, hoping that someone would come along and take pity on us and save us? Should we not be proud of the fact that we came here as slaves and became civilized by a civilizing nation? Are we those people who, as one scholar had said, who have been enslaved and the only people in the history of the world who did absolutely nothing to free themselves? Should we lift up the name of Abraham Lincoln as our liberator because we were too cowardly and didn't have enough fortitude to liberate ourselves? Were we not aware that we were enslaved? We are people up from slavery, not contributing anything else, glad to be here. Should have gotten further than we have now. It's our fault. Can't make no decision for our own benefit. Haven't done anything worth noting. Don't have a history worth celebrating. And this is what I was taught when I was a student. And so imagine how it impacted me when I had a chance, through the urging of Brother Leon Dixon, to check out this brother named Harry Jones. I read a lot of books, been to a lot of workshops, know a lot of people who are making history to this day. Never heard of Harry Jones. But when I had a chance to see him on video, he answered those questions. So what did we do? What we did, from what came from his research, was so profound that I am not the same person I was before I heard him speak. He answered the question that we did not sit idly by and allow others to decide that it was time for us to be free. Who are you then, if you are not those folks who just sat by and waited on the bells to ring to say that it's time now to march towards freedom? Who are you if you actually plotted your own liberation? And if your efforts turned the war for the victory of the South and you liberated yourself, turned the victory for the North and you liberated yourself from the Confederate slavery and oppression, then who are you, brothers and sisters, if you were so strategic that you created spy networks that provided intelligence that won battles and victories that the Northern armies could not win without your help? Who is Harriet Tubman then? Who is she that she was the first woman to lead a military campaign, and probably the only woman to lead a military campaign in this country? We don't even know who we are. But one thing I do know, we didn't sit by idly. We are not the people who did nothing to liberate ourselves. In fact, we are our own liberators. So it was this brother, through his research, that brought forward restoration of our history in a way that speaks to us so profoundly that I guarantee you, after tonight, you won't be the same person you were when you walked in the door. Now, that's a tall thing to say, and I've heard many presentations, but I can tell you that what is about to be brought forth is mind-changing. So, I'm just a humble person. I got educated in the schools in America to tell me who I was not. but I had a chance for a brother, hear from a brother, to tell me what we were capable of and what we've done. So I said this before we come in, and I'll close with this comment. If what is in his head was written down on sheets of paper and stacked up in boxes, if we moved it from here to across the street, it should be in a Brinks truck. That's how profound what it is and how meaningful and valuable what it is. So I asked you to help us greet someone that many of you don't know, never heard of, but you will mark the day that you met him. Brother, scholar, researcher, activist, organizer, restoration, truth teller, liberator, Harry Jones, to the stage.
Turn that away so I don't get feedback. Good evening. In 1944, in movie theaters across this country, you could have seen a film produced by the U.S. government entitled The Negro Soldier. On the advertisement poster, they had the heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis. The film was directed by Frank Capra. In this film, entitled The Negro Soldier, produced by the U.S. government, they covered African-American military service in this country from the 1770s, the Revolutionary War, to the 1940s, World War II. Mentioned African-American involvement in every war in the nation's history during that period, except the Civil War. There was no mention, no image of a single soldier or sailor. 10% of the Union Army was made up of men of African descent. 25% of the Union Navy was made up of men of African descent. African Americans only made up 1% of the northern population. 25 men of African descent had earned the highest honor bestowed on American military personnel for acts of courage in combat during the Civil War. Yet not a single one of those American heroes were mentioned in a film, expression about them, produced by the U.S. government that was in movie theaters across this country in 1944. A complete suppression of the story. So why the complete suppression of this story in this 1944 government-produced film entitled The Negro Soldier? Well, the film reflected what was being taught in the best schools in this country, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Columbia. What was that? That the American Negroes had done little or nothing to free themselves. And so many of us believe today that the day of Jubilee, January 1, 1863, is the day the slaves were set free. Why? Because that's what we were taught. That Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves by simply issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, the story that counters that is an overt story. Yet it's been one of the best kept secrets in American history. Now, that's the overt story. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about a covert story.
All right.
So this is even more secret than the overt story. It's covert. Martin Delany wrote in the North Star, December 1848. But the time shall yet come when the name of the despised, neglected American patriot, in spite of American prejudice, shall rise superior to the spirit that would degrade it and find its place on the records of merit and fame. Close quote. In this article, Martin Delany says, he argues that the true American patriot is one who is true to the creed. It is one who believes that liberty and justice is for all in the body politic. And he would argue that those who do not work toward that are imposters and not true patriots. He was talking about true patriots. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about true patriots. Alan Pinkerton, famed railroad detective, head of Union intelligence, Lincoln's Secret Service in the first 18 months of the war, observed, quote, although as yet prevented from taking up arms in defense of their rights, these colored men had banded themselves together to further the cause of freedom, close quote. Pinkerton would refer to these colored men, or more appropriately, these men and women of African descent who had banded themselves together to further the cause of freedom as members of a secret organization, a national organization called the Loyal League. It was also known as the Legal League. In the Mississippi Valley, it was known as Lincoln's Legal Loyal League, or the 4 L's. This secret African-American organization would become the single most important source of tactical and strategic intelligence during the Civil War. It would provide the top spies in the Civil War. This secret African-American organization would provide the most prolific recruiters of African-Americans for the Union war effort. This secret African-American organization had as its express goal to end the tyranny of slavery in league with the Constitution. They were going to do it legally. By supporting and defending the Constitution, they were going to end the tyranny of slavery. And they were members of a secret organization. The head of the Bureau of Military Information, we call that the Military Intelligence Division, if you will, of the Civil War, or the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, a term we might use today. General George Sharp would write, "The Negroes are an eminently secretive people. They have a system of mutual understanding amounting to Freemasonry among themselves." Close quote. Tonight, I'm going to talk about this organization. I'm going to talk about this mutual understanding, or the codes that they use to communicate. The paradigm that I'm going to use is the starfish. Now, that's Breckstrom and Braffman, who actually recommend this if you're studying terrorist organizations. That this is a good way to study them, and they have five legs. Now, I'm going to tell you the difference between a starfish and a spider. If you cut off the head of the spider, what does the spider do? He dies. If you cut off the head of a starfish, what do you get? 5 more starfish. Regenerates. And this organization is best understood as a starfish, not a spider. The 5 legs of this starfish, the pre-existing network, I will refer to that as the erudite Africans, the scholarly Africans, rarely talked about in our schools. Their circles, their African knowledge circles, their ideology, their African worldview in America. The catalysts, those who form circles, and champions, those who lead by example. This is a non-hierarchical system. So we best understand it as circles. So in leadership within this organization, we shouldn't talk about it in a hierarchy. You don't move up, you move in to the inner circle. The pre-existing network, I want to briefly mention the erudite Africans. If we want to appreciate their educational system, where we should go as scholars is to examine the educational system of the Messina region of Mali, with Timbuktu being the educational center. Now, if you talk to most and they say, "What is Timbuktu to you?" they'll tell you, oh, that is a mysterious place. It was mysterious to Europeans. Or they'll say, "Oh, it was an El Dorado. It was a trade center." The West African saying is, quote, "Salt comes from the north, gold from the south, silver from the land of the Europeans. But the word of God and the treasures of wisdom can only be found in Timbuktu." Close quote. So it's an educational center where the word of God and the treasures of wisdom could be found. In fact, salt came from somewhere else, came from the north. Gold came from somewhere else, it came from the south. Silver from the land of the European. But the word of God and the treasures of wisdom could only be found in Timbuktu. This is what the Africans brought over. These educated, these erudite Africans understood. Yes. They didn't just believe it, they understood it. There's a difference. They understood this. And this would be the African foundation. The foundation of the circle are these educated Africans who understand where they come from. And also I want to mention that the industry that was #1 in Timbuktu was bookbinding. That's right. So this also means all of you who've been taught that you only came from an oral tradition, I'm sorry, that's just not true. You come from a literary tradition as well. The Messina region of Mali, that's where it is today. Today, this was a major kingdom during the so-called transatlantic slave trade. These are Fulani, and I'm going to focus heavily on the Fulani today, mainly because in the primary sources, it's easier to access the Fulani than any of the other erudite Africans. One of the key individuals is Colonel Abdul Rahman Ibrahim, born in Timbuktu in 1762. He was a royal. He graduated from Sankore University of Timbuktu in 1781 with a degree in literature. When he came back home to Timbo is here in Futa-Jalone. When he came back home to Dimbo, his father, who was the king, had a visitor by the name of John Cox, Dr. John Cox. Dr. John Cox was an Irish doctor, and Dr. Cox taught the colonel at that time, the lieutenant, Prince Ibrahima, English. So when Prince was captured in 1788, he spoke 8 languages, one of them English, when he was captured. He had a degree in literature. So when he comes over here, he is not convinced that he comes from an illiterate society. In fact, he knows the opposite. But what he knows about himself makes him a de facto secret to many of those leading the country. To the planter, he's a secret by who he is. I'll come back to Prince later because he's important in the history, in the circle. But now, they're African knowledge circles. In the African knowledge circles, it's important to have some words in your dictionary that are a little bit different than what you've been taught. First, many of us are taught to believe that Sambo means a clown or buffoon. Prince spoke Fulani, or Fulfulde, Pular. And in his language, Sambo, which is an over 2,000-year-old name, means brave warrior. Negus. Prince once said, I have not a drop of Negro blood, I am of the Negus. That's spelled capital N-E-G-U-S. Among our contemporary Ethiopians, speaking Amharic, it will be pronounced Negus. It means emperor or king, or the descendants of the ancient Ethiopian royal lines. Massa. Yes, siree, Massa. No, siree, Massa. Spelled capital M-A-S-A-R. Now, often we were taught that this was broken English. They couldn't say master, so they said Massa. In Fulani, Massa literally means, translated, Egypt or captor. So instead of calling the planter their master, they called him their captor. And you had biblical symbolism when they said Massa as well, because it meant Egypt, captivity. Siree. Yes, siree Massa, no siree Massa. Now, this is pretty clear that they're not speaking broken English. You know why? Because they got the English word sir plus a syllable. They could have stopped at sir, but they added the re. Yes, siree, Massa, no siree. In Fulani, that means one with evil intent or the devil. Yes, siree, Massa was literally yes, evil captain. Himby. Himby, all right. Himby, all right. You know what I was saying? Oh, that's a wrong subject-verb relationship. In the Fulani language, it's spelled H-I-M-B-E, Himby, and Himby means one of the faith, a true believer. So if you are somebody who can be trusted, Himby, all right. Me is I. Holla is speak. Me holla. That means the elder's about to speak through me. Me holla. This is the African foundation. Codes that they had. And the Fulani had their own way of life, even to the point where I'm going to just point to Shatinde or shame. Shatinde or shame means like to be crucified on the cross. So how do they view their captivity in America? They viewed it as if they were being crucified on the cross. Well, it's a totally different way of viewing yourself than we've been presented. Also, they believe that God is the creator of all that exists. That God commands all that exists. God is all-powerful. Man is powerless in the domain of God. Man can communicate with God. God is the master of man. Man is both free and determined in relation to God. In other words, your liberty is a gift from God. Himby also includes Jews, Christians, and Muslims. A person of the faith. So no one within this inner circle is a non-believer. This is critical in understanding them. This is a faith-based organization. They believe, but they're not particular to the religion. They're particular to the faith. The faith in the one God. And again, I said it's non-hierarchical. So we don't have the traditional subordinate, ordinate relationships with it. This is non-hierarchical. The ideology, their African worldview in America. I refer to this as the ideological glue. Now, many of these Africans brought over were not any different in education, ethnic identity, as Africans who were brought to Cuba, who were brought to Brazil, Mexico. We could go on and on throughout the Americas. But what makes them different here in the United States is what I refer to as the ideological glue. And what is this ideological glue? I'm going to refer to it as the American formation. Some individuals that you should look to in understanding this ideological glue: Prince Hall, African-American leader, veteran of the Revolutionary War, a community leader, an early civil rights leader. In fact, anybody who says, I want to study civil rights, and you don't begin with Prince Hall, I don't think you're going to study civil rights. I think you're going to study the consequences of civil rights. Absalom Jones, Richard Allen, David Walker, all a part of this foundation. These are men in the know who are part of this foundation that's a part of this ideological glue, and I'm going to come to what that ideological glue is really about in a moment. And these men work as catalysts, and those are the ones who form the circles. Prince Hall, he would say, I shall at this time attempt to raise part of the superstructure, for howsoever good the foundation may be, yet without this it will prove a babel. In other words, it's going to be all confusion. So we've got organization going on as well, and with Prince Hall, he would establish the African Lodge Basin, but it's even bigger than that, because where did you see the outgrowth of African societies that help with your life insurance? If you get, in the late 1700s, if you got injured, you didn't go to the state to help you with being injured. But you could go to these African societies established by men like Prince Hall to help you through your difficulty. Richard Allen. Richard Allen was advised by Prince Hall to establish a church independent from the Methodists there in Philadelphia. Richard Allen was slow to do this. Absalom Jones was pretty quick with the Episcopalians, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But Richard Allen really addresses how these people view themselves. This land which we have watered with our tears, our blood is now our mother country. Now, this is important too in understanding how they view this. These Africans who are the fathers and mothers of American-born Africans are teaching them that your fatherland is Africa and your motherland is America. Now, I want you to think how profound this is. When you are born, your daddy can be anywhere. But wherever your mama is, that's where you are. But Absalom Jones, he would be the first, after Prince Hall is saying we need to establish our own religious institutions. The first to actually act on this is Absalom Jones, St. Thomas African Episcopal Church in Philadelphia. And on January 1, 1808, Absalom Jones would really share with us the concepts of what I refer to as the ideological glue. His introductory scripture was Exodus 3, 1 through 8. See, God has heard the prayers of the oppressed people. And God has heard their prayers. And Absalom Jones, for those Uncle Toms, and I'm going to explain what Uncle Tom is later. If I don't, ask me any question, answer. For those Uncle Toms who doubted, Absalom Jones says, well, I'm not saying necessarily that you are the Israelites. But I'm saying, as a matter of fact, that the history of the world shows us that the deliverance of the children of Israel from their bondage is not the only instance in which it has pleased God to appear in behalf of oppressed and distressed nations as the deliverer of the innocent and those who call his name. And he's saying that we know you've been calling his name. We've been praying to him for deliverance. And he goes on to say there is evidence that God has come down to deliver us. And what is this evidence? He first identifies it in the creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Well, he says that this is evidence.
I'm IFBB Bikini Pro Cat Williams, and when I'm not working out in the gym, I'm searching the web on Cascade Media and What's Up Kansas City. So make sure you check them out.